The will weaves, the will wills. Welcome to another great episode of Caleb's Corner. I finished Wheel of Time. It's taken me like 3 years, but I've done it. Wheel of Time is a very long, very complex world. As much as I wished to be done with the series after reading it for so long, I was very happy that it was over. It was very bittersweet, best way I can say it. It was satisfying, it was thrilling, exciting, and to quote Tom himself, a very exquisite experience in the end. I have lots of thoughts. This isn't really as much my process reading the series, overall thoughts. It's more just I want to really hone in on the end. I'm gonna make a video about the series as a whole later. So, pre-spoilers. There's not a lot I can get on. Specifically, without touching on spoilers, this is the last book of a 15-book series after all. TLDR, I love the series. I have all the respect in the world for Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. It's good. And I'll also concede, this is not for everybody, by far. A YouTuber I love, by the name of Generic Content, did a great sketch a few years ago about reading Wheel of Time and how it's like the best series that no one will ever recommend to you because it's both it's so good, but it's just so flawed at times. It really feels like Stockholm Syndrome, some of those books. You're like, man, I'm reading this because I have to at this point. If you're interested in the series, I would really suggest reading the audiobooks, listening to the audiobooks. Even if you are a big reader yourself, I don't think I would have gotten to the series if it wasn't for Michael Kramer and Kate Reading bring this world to life. They are the best in the business, love them. So right after I finished the series, moments afterwards, I texted my wife and told her I was done. Cause it's been a 3-year-long journey and I was telling her all about it on the way. And she asked me when I finished, how do you feel? What are your thoughts? And I was like, honestly, how do you even explain the feelings of something that can really only just be experienced? I think the best way I like to think about it is, if you invest into the Wheel of Time, the Wheel of Time will invest into you, and you'll get, the more you read, the more you put into it, more satisfied you will be at the end. It's like working on a really huge project. You start out, it's really hard, you're not seeing a lot of progress, it sucks, but if you keep at it, if you keep going, the end is very fulfilling. Getting done with that product, wherever have you, special. And I think the Wheel of Time is like that. If it's not for you, well, the wheel can't make everyone go to the light, unfortunately. There must be balance. And if it ain't for you, then the light hasn't chosen you, and I'm sorry. That is gonna conclude my pre-spoilers thought. It's good. Read Wheel of Time. So from here on out, if you have not finished In Memory of Light, and don't wish that spoiled on you, and I suggest even if you haven't read Memory of Light, you're not, this isn't for you, get out of here. This isn't for you. So yeah, from here on out, big spoilers for Memory of Light and Wheel of Time in general. Bro, I don't really know where to start with Memory of Light, but how do you even start to explain a book that except for maybe the first 400 pages or so, is one gigantic Sanderlanche. I'm not a super fast reader, never have been. I'm not someone who binges books or shows that often. Once the battle started in this book, I was done with the series, done with the book, within a week. It was a lot of fun. It was one of the best reading experiences I've ever had in my life. I would not want Brandon Sanderson's task, to take Robert Jordan's notes, figure them out, decipher them, plan them, and then have to write the conclusion. No, thank you. But he did it. He did it, and he did it really well. And of course, with any series, it's 15 books with 2 authors. There's gonna be some issues, and we are gonna get to those. But I just wanted to reiterate before we get to that stuff, it's so good. And there's criticisms, with any book there's criticisms. It's impressive the work Brandon has done to conclude this for Robert Jordan and his fans. So how I'm gonna do this review is what I'm calling my Gob Bluth review. Only worry about Gob. It's good, odd, and bad. Why? Gob, those are the words I thought of, and I was like, hey, that's Joe Bluth right there. I'm gonna start with the bad because I believe in bad news first. So really it should be the Bog review, but Joe Job Gob sounds better. Who cares? Sue me. So the first bad thing I have is I think the relationship between the three Two Rivers boys was kind of like it flopped a little bit. And I get like there's so much happening in this book, there's so many threads, so much going on. I really wanted one last scene, or just one scene in this book with all three Two Rivers boys, all three ta'veren, together, hanging out, being pals. Because we haven't had that since Dragon Reborn. 11 books ago was the last time all three of these boys were in the same space together. I understand that everyone has their own plots, they're doing different things. And I don't know practically if it could have even happened if Brandon Sanderson wanted to. And maybe it couldn't have. You know, I didn't have Robert Jordan's notes. Brandon did, and this is what he chose. It's a small thing. I get it. It's not an important note. But I really do wish that there was a moment shared between the three boys. Even if it was all three of them at the end with Rand's body being burned. That isn't Rand. We'll get to that later. Second bad is Matt Cawthon. But only sort of. I love Matt. Everyone loves Matt. And it's pretty well documented that Brandon Sanderson struggled with writing Matt, especially in his first outing. I do think his writing, he's got a lot better as time went on. Brandon Sanderson writes him really well as being the general, that leader, but I think he really flops with his interactions with the other Two Rivers guys. I mean more specifically his issues with the Two Rivers guys as in Rand. My first reaction when I've read the first Brandon book and read Matt was like, man, why is like Matt an asshole now? Like he's kind of snarky, but he's not like an asshole. Matt is not the kind of character Brandon would write. Brandon's humor is very different from Robert Jordan's, and I think a lot of Matt's character comes from his humor. So I get it. It's not his guy. Understandable. But it was just difficult for me at times because there's a specific scene, I don't really remember if this was in Towers of Midnight or in Memory of Light. Basically, like Matt is on the road and he feels being pulled to Rand, the Targaryen pull. And he's like, oh, nope, gonna avoid that. Don't like that. And because I don't want to be around Rand because he's a scary dragon guy. So I'm saying, it's like their brotherhood and the Aiel waste, their friendship, I just don't see Matt being so like, don't want to talk to that guy. I don't want to see him. Matt essentially, like, he may like groan about it, but he's always there for his bros. He's always there for anybody. The things I probably don't know, and plot-wise, may have just had to happen that way because he had to go be with Tuon, and I'm irked that Matt didn't see Rand dead. I know it's not really important ultimately, but it felt important to me. It felt important for that friendship to have a little bit of closure, a little bit of just like, I'm here for you. It just like didn't hit right. Again, Matt as general, I think Brandon is best writing with Matt in this book. I loved Rand and Matt's interaction and being in this book when they're trying to one-up each other about like things they've done. And it felt very natural for the character. I really wish all three boys had a moment together. I can't really complain about it, but just something I wanted that I didn't have, you know? And I want the things I want. Another bad that like, I feel like now I shouldn't be putting bad, but I put in bad when I wrote this, is Moiraine. And I love Moiraine. I really like very strong moral characters. One of my favorite fictional characters, not in Wheel of Time, is Jean-Luc Picard. I love just how calm he is through danger and how ethically and morally sound he is. Like he knows what he's about, he knows what he's doing, but he's calm about it. And Moiraine is like that in a lot of ways. She was a strong person for Rand. She pushed people, but she was who she needed to be. But her whole philosophy of just like the will weaves, the will wills. Like she can control what she can control. Everything else, the will weaves, the will wills. I think it's beautiful. I love Moiraine. There's so much lead up after Moraine's death, or whatever you want to call it. And then finally in book 11, you know, Matt reads the letter Tom has, and he's like, oh, we gotta go to the Tower of the Machine Guy and save Moiraine. And I'm like, oh, cool, that's what the next book is gonna be about. And then it doesn't happen in that book. And then it's like, oh, that's what the next book is gonna be about. And it finally happens in the last like 50 pages. And there's just so much build up to it. And she's such an important character to the series that like, I expect her to do more in this book. I know this book isn't about Moraine. I understand why she wasn't needed to be there, and I still feel like I just really wanted more Moraine. I feel like Tom, Matt, and Naol risked their lives, and Naol gave his life for Moraine to basically just kind of be present in scenes. I know what she did when there was that huge scene in the tent where like she comes in and like saves the day, and she does because she's great and awesome and a stunning queen. And I know she's really needed. She's one of the only people Moraine can trust to use Calendor with him. So I get it. Like, she is very important to the plot still. I just wanted her to say and do more. I don't think, I could be missing this, but I don't think there was a scene where Moraine and Siuan, where Siuan was aware of Moraine being alive again, which just doesn't make sense because they were like pillow friends, you know? They definitely weren't, doing stuff as pillow friends. I really wanted more of Moraine and Tom's relationship. I thought the writing of their relationship, which we only get like a few pages of it in Towers of Midnight, which is so sweet, and they're just so like, I know this is Brandon writing, not Robert Jordan, but Robert Jordan's always kind of struggled with relationships. But it just, even though it was so quick, a little bit of a bootstrap paradox, it just felt so real and so full. And like, oh, you get why these people love each other so much. I was really excited to see more of Tom and Moraine in this, and them just being a couple and them being sweet to each other. But there wasn't much of an opportunity for that. I think it was a little bit of a letdown not to have a little bit more of her. And my last bad, which now I'm like, man, is this really that bad, is Perrin. I have been a Perrin stan from day one. And there's a lot of Perrin haters out there. I thought all of his dream walking stuff in Tel'aran'rhiod in this book was really cool. I thought he had a good arc. But I'm gonna be honest, man, I did not care at all about Slayer. I just it maybe I missed like some context of who he was or why he was like more than just being like, oh, I'm evil bad guy for Perrin to fight. That's what it felt like, and it felt kind of hollow. And again, I really liked what he was doing. I just felt like I didn't care about Perrin stuff, which is weird because I like Perrin. I've enjoyed all of his content before. I even liked the trial in the previous book, which apparently people didn't like the trial. The trial was cool. And I understand he's really important. Like, he essentially saves Rand at the end, Lanfear killing him. And I also want to speak on that point because I understand why he'd hate Moraine, but when I read that, initially I was like, what are you talking about? I think for me, it just felt off because his actions to me never felt like, oh, I hate Moraine, which I don't think really it's Moraine he hates. I think it's more, at least my headcanon, is that it's more of Moraine has caused a lot of bad things to happen in my life. My life was better in 2 Rivers before Moraine came. Adjacent, same thing. My initial reading on that, I just didn't get it. I didn't feel it. Perrin was the one plot on this book that I was the least worried about. I think it was great how I felt like everyone was in danger. Even though Perrin was potentially in the most danger, being in the dream world and the flesh, and how that could basically ruin yourself for the whole turning of the wheel, I didn't feel danger for him. And it's just been me. Yeah, it just didn't land for me. I did like other Perrin scenes. I loved the things he did in the dream. It just this fight with Slayer, the conflict with Lanfear. I don't know, just didn't work for me. On to my odd stuff. So, the first thing, probably the biggest thing, probably the thing that people will say the most about the end of Memory of Light is that there's 20 pages, if that, of epilogue. The series is over. And I understand why that is, and also I think it's better. But I just mentioned the fact that I wish there was more there. So you have this 15-book series. You have this final book that is essentially one large battle sequence. And I'm reading it, and I see there's a chapter of 250 pages. And there's about 200 pages afterwards. Oh, well, this huge chapter called The Last Battle is going to be the end. And the last 200 pages is going to be nice, wind down commiseration. And then I finished the last battle chapter, and the fight kept going, and I was like, oh, we're gonna have to wrap this up quick. I kept reading, I'm like, oh, they're gonna have to wrap this up really quick. And then I got to the last chapter and I was like, they're gonna have to wrap this up really quick. And once I like it, you know, we've been in this world so long. We know the general trajectory all these characters are going on. Do we need more? No. The wheel keeps turning. The story was about the struggle between light and dark. That struggle has been resolved. The wheel keeps turning. And that's why I feel like Brandon chose the best route. If he gave too much, we wouldn't have the opportunity to speculate and imagine these characters' lives afterwards. I found it really enjoyable after finishing Memory of Light, reading forums online about, speculation of like these characters' lives past or what happens after the end. And that was really enjoyable because it gave the series second life and it gave it a more tangible personal life to me because now I can imagine the end of these characters. I know Robert Jordan had plans for Outtriggers, very light notes on things afterwards. I don't want it. I don't need it. I don't want anyone to touch Wheel of Time. But there are things I think there should have been a little bit more. As much as I went to defend the epilogue at the end, I think it could have been a tad bit long. Have the scene where the three boys are together. Have a moment where Tom and Moiraine are being the perfect couple. One final thought on the epilogue section. So a large motivation for Robert Jordan writing the series was this idea of mythology and how myths created, how they're remembered. And so I think it's very fitting that essentially after the series is over, we now as the fans have to go and mythologize about these characters afterwards. I think that's beautiful. And I think that's like what Robert Jordan would have wanted. Another odd that now that I'm thinking about it after I wrote this script, I think I'd probably move to good, is that the Aiel prophecy. So if you remember in the previous book, I think it was book 13, could be wrong, Aviendha goes to the Aiel Waste. She goes through Rhuidean and she goes back another time, which she's not supposed to do. And so she sees visions of the future of the Aiel. And remember, there's a long prophecy about the dragon being the end of the Aiel and destroying the Aiel. And this prophecy, Aviendha sees, is the Aiel being hunted and destroyed, essentially, over about 2 or 3 generations. I did not expect this to really get resolved. I think it's a cool kind of like thing to think about, but I figured it was gonna be too far in the future to really resolve out. And I like that we're just kind of there left to figure out like, okay, did Aviendha change the future? We're kind of led to believe that most time in Wheel of Time, that like if there's a future prophecy, it will happen. Who's to say that this wasn't a future and not the future? The Aiel prophecy, I think is cool. Another odd thing I have about this book is I think I expected there to be a little bit more philosophy. And what I mean by that is a large motivation of me reading this series as the longer went on was I wanted to know what Robert Jordan was saying by writing the series. I think there is a lot of philosophy here. I think there's a lot of things to unpack and think about. But as I've read and sat on this more, I think it's okay that maybe Robert Jordan wrote this as a good story. And it doesn't matter if it's a like grand, amazing philosophical idea. I think I want to be a little more specific in that I loved the conversations with Darkwing and Rand in this book. I love the interplay of free will, shaping of the world, what that looks like, how it affects people. And I wanted more of it. Each time they were really getting to the meat of it, they jumped into someone else. But you know, this is a very fast-paced book. There's a lot to get through. I think I just wanted, I wanted those scenes to stick a little bit longer. I wanted to go a tad bit deeper, but I think there was just a few paragraphs more on each scene would have just given me what I needed. And my last kind of odd thing is just, there's a few characters that I feel like don't get a lot of screen time. And granted, those are characters that have had lots of screen time. I'm really talking specifically about Nynaeve, Moiraine, and Cadsuane, which I've already talked about Moiraine. But Nynaeve, very important, great character. She's had her moment, but she still was just kind of present and then there to use Callandor with Rand. That's all she needed to do, I know. And Cadsuane, I like Cadsuane a lot. I know it's kind of, people are either love Cadsuane or hate Cadsuane. I like her. I would not want to hang out with Cat Swain ever. And it's pretty well documented that like Brandon Sanderson hates Cat Swain. So I get why he wouldn't like write a lot with cats using Cat Swain. I love that she knows about Rand at the end. I think that's so fitting of Cat Swain. But I think throughout, I was just like, I want a touch more of Cat Swain. I have one more that I just thought about as far as the odd category, and that's Padan Fain. Padan Fain broke up the whole series being this huge monumental thing. I forgot about Padan Fain until the moment he showed up in the last battle. I was like, shit, we gotta go deal with this guy too. And then Matt just goes him, which I know is very controversial. I know you expect this big lead up being like this big thing, but I feel it's fitting. Padan Fain is just there in the background, and ultimately he is insignificant. I like what that's saying of like he's this dark character who's building, and then he just becomes insignificant. I know there's theories about why that is, about him being built up as a replacement for the Dark One. But even before I was like privy to those theories, I was kind of like, I would have liked more, but it adds up, makes sense. I'm cool with it. I like it. And now for the good stuff, the stuff I loved in this book. Probably the thing I noticed most outright, and a thing that Brandon Sanderson is the master of, is just pacing. The pacing in this book is phenomenal. Having basically an 800-page fight could have been so exhausting and so dreadful, but Brandon Sanderson keeps it going. Tension is escalating, tension is building. There are so many different low points and climaxes along the way. I don't know how Bro did it. I don't know how he took some guy's notes and made that fight scene for 800 pages. Bro is a master. Second thing I loved is Andral and Pravara. Brandon is great at making a magic system and then breaking it and making something new of that. And he does that in some ways with Andral and Pravara. He investigates further like the bonds, what happens if someone bonds someone, whether they're bonded, and having a double bond. He's really showcasing to its full extent what gateways can do. It's pretty genius. And I have seen the critique of, Andral and Pravara get a lot of screen time and other characters don't. And like you could take a lot of the Andral and Pravara stuff out, and I think you'd get a lot of the same effect, but throughout the whole series, we needed more Black Tower stuff. I don't mind that Brandon created this character and added him in at the last book, essentially. Because this works, and he's a great character. I love his relationship with Pravara throughout, and how they grow and learn to really work well together and fall in love with each other through the course of it. It's kind of beautiful. And still on the magic, I want to talk about with Flame of Tor Valon. I have had a love-hate relationship with Egwene from day one. There are things I love about her character. There are things that I cannot stand about her. I think that means she's a very well-written character that's like, man, I can't decide. But I think she's great in this book. Aside from marrying Gawain, who is totally useless and stupid, I love Egwene in this book. I love what she does with the power. I love how she essentially figures out while in combat, like, hey, there has to be the opposite of this Balefire Weave. I like that she dies using it, keeping that secret. Her figuring out the name, the whole moment, discovering the Flame of Tor Valon, dying, the imagery of her soul leaving her body and the crystal tower remaining behind. I think that is one of the peak moments for me in Wheel of Time. Another great thing about this book is how they handle character deaths. I expected many more character deaths throughout. I expected one of the main cast to pass, and stay dead. But I think this book did a really good job of, Egwene being one of the core cast. She gets a lot of screen time leading up to her death. And even though I love Siuan as a character, I think that it was very smart of Brandon to have her death be so kind of random and chaotic and sudden. You don't get a lot of time with that. I felt like a lot of the characters were in danger through this series. Specifically, I was so worried when all of the great captains were being compulsed. I was so worried for Rodel Eteralda because I think he's so cool. And I was like, Rodel can't die. Rodel can't turn to the dark. He turned out fine. And he's gonna be king now, which is cool, I guess. I think Brandon was really smart of how he paced the deaths out. He gives a lot of time for important deaths like Egwene and Lan. asterisk around Lan. I know Lan didn't actually die. I thought Lan was dead. And that is one of the few fake out deaths that I was like, good job. But then you have like smaller characters that die throughout, like Gareth Bryn, and they basically get passing mentions of like, oh, this character died. I think that was very clever because it keeps stakes up. You know people are dying, you know it's real, but you don't waste too much time. The time spent on this book, the effectiveness of the pacing, masterclass. How do you do it? How did he do it? We never know. He's a robot. That's how he did it. I think he did really great with individual character arcs. You know, Lan's arc through the last 2 books is so great. Him telling Demandred, like, hey, I didn't come here to live. I didn't came here to win. I came here to kill you. Bro. Okay, dude. Mat had a great arc with him becoming general and becoming more aware of like, hey, I help people. I'm good at that. Everyone had great arcs. So I've kind of avoided talking about the big guy, the big redhead in the room. I still have lots of thoughts about Rand's ending, because I've just been went on like 3 tangents about fake out deaths and how I don't love them. I think everything leading up is so great. I love the conflict. I love the philosophy of like, we have to have darkness. We have to have something to overcome for light to mean anything. I think it works so well how the body switching worked between Rand and Moradin. I full stop believed that Rand would make it. Even though part of me, I was like, Rand's gonna make it. I think I like the story of the hero dying for the cause. The process of why I thought Rand shouldn't die is, what is Rand gonna do afterwards? What does Rand have left to do after he's fought the Dark One? And I just really couldn't imagine Rand going back and living any kind of simple or any kind of like life afterwards. And they got around that with the body swap with Moradin, which again, I think is super clever. And obviously like Robert Jordan had planned that from day one. It was super fleshed out. It made sense, saw it coming. And after I have sat with that ending, I think I get it. I think initially I was like, a little like, I feel it would have been worked better if Rand died. The idea of Rand being able to live on and he can just kind of live freely, travel the world, live slower, chop wood to sleep in a barn. I think that's really beautiful. I try not to get too caught up in the functions of how this fake death would work, because presumably if he still has a relationship with Elaine, Aviendha, and Min, I assume that if they have more children, they look like Moradin, but also like, I don't see Rand not being involved in Elaine's kids' lives. I don't see him as that kind of dad. People are gonna ask questions about who this guy is. I don't want to think about that because I don't think Robert Jordan cares about those specific details. I don't think we should, because I think how it ends is how we should see Rand. He's traveling, he's moving, that's where he is. You know, it's a fantasy world. We don't need to take things too literally. As much I think we are programmed in our culture to see fantasy literally. Those are most of my thoughts on the ending of Wheel of Time. I'm sure I'll have more. I will do a reread of Wheel of Time one day. I can already feel the pull. The wheel is weaving it as we speak, but that is not right now. I'm excited to explore other things. I really appreciate this end a lot. A lot of the faults I think can only just be attributed to like, how the hell do you finish a 14-book series? How the hell do you finish a series that the author, the lifeblood of this, the creator of this world, passes before finishing it? It really is an impossible task. There is a quote that I tried so hard to find this quote. I looked in my books, I tried to Google it, but I can't get the exact phrasing. But essentially, the quote is something like, not all stories have meaning, but some stories have meaning if you look for it. And if I remember right, that quote was somewhere in the slog. I should have written it down. It really connects with this motivation I had to the whole series. Like, I want to see the whole picture. I want to know what Robert Jordan is saying. And that was my thing, that I was like, oh, well, Robert Jordan has to be saying some huge philosophical idea with all these books. And while I think there is things he is saying with this story, I finished the book, I was reading about the end, I like remember typing in like Wheel of Time philosophy and stuff like that, trying to find some like key, because I had parts of it, but I like hadn't had the whole picture. I wanted to figure it out. And I ended up reading this interview that I know I had read or listened to before. Essentially, the interviewer asks Robert Jordan, like, what motivated you to write this story? And he names a couple of things, but he's like, really, I just wanted to write a good story. I think seeing that really changed my perspective. You know, I was an English major in college. I taught English for 2 years. I was kind of programmed and expected that everything has meaning, and the job of literature is to say something. But I've forgotten that like sometimes like good stories can just be good stories, and that's all they need to be, all they should be. And so it's kind of magical for me finishing this and like still processing the end and then being like, oh, like this is a good story. That's all it needs to be. And yes, Robert Jordan is saying other things within this. First and foremost, like it can stand on its own as a story. It doesn't need to be anything else. And I think that also kind of touched me as a writer, in that like when I was writing my novel, I spent a lot of time like, oh, what are the themes of this? What am I saying with this? But I kept writing and kept being like, oh, when I write more, I'll figure it out. But really what I was doing, I was exploring this world, exploring these characters without realizing it. I just wanted to write a good story too. I want to explore the story that I want to explore, and it has meaning. I think most writings, most stories have meaning, but meaning can be secondary. And it's probably like not mind-blowing for y'all, but I think it's been transformed the way I've been thinking about things, that stories can just be stories. So as the wheel of time churns and the ages come and pass, we can just say that it was a good story and it affected us and we put our meaning into it. But it doesn't have to mean anything. It can just be a good ride, a good story, good friends, and good 2 rivers to Bach.